Ask yourself, is your success in this world increasing your gratitude or increasing your arrogance? Have you had the chance to really reflect on the reality of your blessings? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, everyone. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. In ayah 32 of Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us a very interesting story. It tells us that wealth is just as severe a fitna as poverty. They're both tests, and people fail both every single day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about two men who one of them had two gardens, and he had a quality and quantity and variety of agriculture and fruit and wealth that the other man did not have. And through that wealth, he became arrogant. He put down his companion and he told him, I'm greater than you. I'm more significant. I'm more blessed. And that emotion led him even to deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he said, وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً. I don't think that the day of judgment will happen. I don't think there's a resurrection. And if there is one, if I will return to my Lord, I'll find better than what I'm experiencing now. And that's the formula. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, كَلَّا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَيَطْغَى أَن رَّآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. In Surah Al-Alaq, man is ever transgressing when he sees himself as self-sufficient, when he gets lost in his blessings. That's the formula. It begins by saying, I have what you do not have. Then it develops into, I'm better than you. And then that eventually leads to the denial of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings, arrogance towards Him, and then perhaps denial of the hereafter. And that's why it's super important for us to be hyper aware of this kind of attitude, because it's the norm in our society nowadays. It is something that is injected into media, into entertainment, into almost every single industry. It's for that same reason that we may find some people that they can watch the same type of entertainment over and over. They can watch 30 Avengers movies, but then may scoff at the stories of the prophets. That they can marvel at the idea of the multiverse, infinite realities, but then raise their eyebrows at qadar or some other concept in our faith. We have to be hyper aware of the inputs that we allow into our minds and into our hearts, because just like the man with the two gardens, they began to corrupt not just his attitude towards others, but then eventually his heart and his attitude towards his Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. His friend notices this dangerous trajectory, and he steps in and he comes with the solution. The first thing that he did was call him to the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him. قَالَ لَهُ صَاحِبُهُ وَيُحَاوِرُهُ أَكَفَرْتَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَكَ. His friend spoke to him now, advised him, having this discourse with him. Are you disbelieving in the one who created you? By contesting the hereafter, by doubting in it? Are you forgetting the origin material from which you were created? From dust, from a lowly fluid? The first solution to this kind of attitude is to be humble, to realize our origins, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gave us everything, beginning with our very creation. And he tells him, لَكِنَّهُ اللَّهُ رَبِّي وَلَا أُشْرِكُ بِرَبِّي أَحَدًا. He speaks with conviction. Allah is my Lord, and I do not associate any partners with Him. He didn't have that same wealth. He didn't have those same luxuries or that same manpower that his friend was boasting with, but it didn't make him resentful. It didn't make him wishful for any of it or envious. He said, I have conviction in my Lord, and I do not associate any partners with Him. So I'm not speaking to you out of jealousy, out of some kind of wish for your wealth, even though you were putting me down. For me, it's a matter of principle and conviction. It's a matter of purpose, and these things are very clear to me. So he was leading by example. It's very different than what we see from some people. Sometimes, even though they have these convictions, the attitude that they come with is that they look up to these things. So then he tells him, after reminding him of his origin, he tells him, and you have no right to look down upon me, because it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who determined this wealth, and He may give me more than you one day. فَعَسَى رَبِّي أَنْ يَأْتِيَنِي خَيْرًا مِنْ جَنَّتِكَ. Maybe He's going to give me something better than these gardens that you have. And this was in line with what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us, that in matters of dunya, in matters of worldly luxuries or wealth, we look down. We look at those who have less than us so we can be humble. And in matters of deen, of religious commitment, we look up to those who are better than us so that we can be encouraged and never satisfied with where we are. So he's saying you should have done the same. You should have looked down, seen me, I have less than you, and that should have made you grateful. That should have made you compassionate. That should have made you charitable, as opposed to making you arrogant or to belittle me. The third thing his friend advises him with is the important realization that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can reverse these affairs. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may destroy your garden. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may take away its water, and you'll be unable to nurture it, to grow it anymore. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may send upon it a punishment from the heavens, and it'll no longer be viable. And this is also in line with what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us in his own dua, where he would seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the suddenness of his punishment, from the cessation of his blessings, and from any type of manifestation of his displeasure. The Prophet ﷺ would say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min zawali ni'matik wa fujaati niqmatik wa min jami'i sakhatik. These are the three keys to snapping out of this kind of mentality, to not being deluded by wealth and not falling down this rabbit hole, following along this dangerous trajectory that goes from wealth to arrogance to self-sufficiency to denial of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings, and God forbid even disbelief or doubt in the resurrection. Unfortunately, none of these reminders worked for the man who had two gardens. He did not reflect over them, he was not heedful of his friend's advice, and he still continued in his arrogance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأُحِيطَ بِثَمَرِهِ. So his plants, his gardens, his wealth, all of it was wiped out, and it did not avail him against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the least. فَأَصْبَحَ يُقَلِّبُ كَفَّيْهِ. Then he began to wring his hands in regret. I could have, I would have, I should have. This other man was right. This was all a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's one of the worst things, is that hindsight is 20/20, but it does not avail. It does not help. It is too late to effect a change, and now the punishment has descended upon this man's wealth and has been cut off in its entirety, and he has no access to any of it, and the regret does not help in this situation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us this story so that for those of us who have wealth, we don't follow that same trajectory. We don't end up wringing our hands in regret, looking back in the rear view mirror and realizing what we could have done, what we should have done, what we had the ability to do all along, which is reflect, be grateful, use it in a fashion that is pleasing to our Creator, and not be lost in this concept of this worldly life being the all for our existence. Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُنَالِكَ الْوَلَايَةُ لِلَّهِ الْحَقِّ هُوَ خَيْرٌ ثَوَابًا وَخَيْرٌ عُقْبًا. The final resolution of the affair at this point, in this calamity, through this test, is to realize that your support system is only ever with your Creator, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the truest support system.